Stacy, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It is such an honor to be here.
I'm excited to dive more into your story. You and I spoke at an event in the DC area, and we started talking after we both spoke, and I was like, "Your story is incredible. Like how you presented yourself and all the information that you shared, all that stuff. It was like I was like, you have to come on the podcast. It was almost immediate. I was like, you have to come on the podcast. So I'm excited to share your story. But where I want to start is who is Stacy today, and then we'll break down how you got there because that's wild.
Yeah, no, for sure, for sure. So, Stacy today. Wow. Stacy today is a woman who's learned to truly let go. This journey, especially over this last year, but ultimately I think about this journey to becoming our best selves was about letting go of all of the ways in which I learned to stay safe growing up, right? Navigating childhood traumas and instabilities and all of that. And so I learned to survive through control. And through all of that, the more I've learned to let go, surrender to God's plan, what is not mine to control, and really focus on what is in my control, which is
Yeah.
just me. That, and it's a game now. It's like, how can I play in this realm of being my best and seeing the fun things that are constantly unfolding, meeting amazing people like you, right? And to say, wow, look at how I've grown to attract opportunity and relationship and community.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think that subject is super important for entrepreneurs, right? Like letting
Mhm.
go. I think when you build something, like even if you've already had success, right? Like especially if you've already had success,
Mhm.
you go, well, no, I did this. I'm going to continue to control and move certain things and do all this stuff. Like part of my story is I tried to control literally everything, and it destroyed relationships, it destroyed friendships, it destroyed business, it destroyed a ton of stuff. And when I was able to finally let go, things started to flow a lot better. But like, what was that moment for you? Because your control peak, I should say, your control peak was extreme, right?
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about that moment and when you knew you needed to decide to let go.
Oh, yeah. I don't think it was a moment of allowing, learning to let go. It was as I say, sort of a bitch slap from Holy Spirit.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. But I think it's setting the stage, like even to your story, right? And my story, and especially entrepreneurs or those who are really fueled to impact and change the world and leave it better than when we arrived, is that entrepreneurs, 90% of entrepreneurs come from some type of childhood adversity, 75% from big T trauma. And that creates a beautiful dichotomy in that, we are motivated to help others. I think there's a lot of that hardship that inspires and empowers us to say, you know what, I am a problem solver. I want to help other people not go through the same things that I went through in some form or fashion, whatever that is. And then the opposite is I want to be in control of my own destiny, not anybody else, because there were so many times when we were growing up, we didn't have control. And in that taking control, we go too far.
Yeah.
So, really, most entrepreneurs who think they're high performers are not. They're really just high functioning, unhealthy coping with an ROI, AKA control. So
Wow.
that's the reality is it's our high functioning habits of hustle and control and perfection and expectation and all the things that we do to create outcomes, and it'll give you a return on investment, and it works until it doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, there's too many examples of people that have been on my show that are operating at such a high level. They had the ROI, but they found themselves in a rock bottom place. They found themselves searching for more. They found themselves on the doorstep of suicide. All of these things, and you're just like, okay, well, that's clearly not the answer. Your ROI is not the answer. What would you say is the answer? Like, in order to find fulfillment? Because I think, at the end of the day, we could use different words, success and so on and so forth, but
Yeah,
fulfillment is what we really want.
so true.
What would be the answer to fulfillment for somebody who has only heard what society says should
Mm.
be the thing?
Well, kind of going back to that same high functioning as opposed to true high performance. It's thinking about it like the chasing the dragon, right, of addiction. When, after that first dose of whatever it is, it's chasing the high that will never happen again. And for a lot of entrepreneurs, I always say is they're chasing the dragon of fulfillment because they're chasing an idea and yet will never let down the walls to actually receive it. So they'll chase the fulfillment and never experience it because all of it is this external game, this external experience. So true success and fulfillment come from it being an internal experience where it shifts into who you're being and your ability to be present. That's where fulfillment comes from. And the experience of it varies from person to person based on how you define success. But it's those moments of presence, of connection to yourself, to others, to your higher power, whatever it is, recognizing that oneness that connects everything and everyone.
Yeah.
And that's the journey that can only happen going inward. There's nothing external that can fix that. But that's what got me to that rock bottom moment 10 years ago is that I had built a life of shoulds.
Hmm.
So, for those of you who don't know, and I'm an Iraq war veteran, when I cleaned up anthrax at the Pentagon after 9/11, was on the front lines when we first invaded Iraq in 03. Got to do some cool stuff. Saw some shit, been there, done
Yeah, I
that,
bet.
right? Got hurt when I was there. So I was medically discharged afterwards. And what was interesting is that being on that pathway was very disruptive, right? It's not, I was beat into my mind from early in life, like you graduate high school, go to college, get a corporate job, the whole quote unquote prescriptive American dream. So then when I got hurt and got out, I kind of went back to that status quo should story of building that life that I was told I needed to have. So went back to college and very quickly it was all about the performance and the control, like getting the straight A's, graduating valedictorian as a non-traditional student. Wasn't even trying to, but that's how much I focused on the dopamine hit of getting good grades while my new marriage was actually suffering
Mm.
because I was focusing on performance and action, not emotion and relationships. So get recruited as a pharmaceutical chemist right out of school. And I did that. Quickly we bought the house and then we've got the cars and then we've got the vacations and, checking all the boxes of the American dream. But what was interesting is that it became my prison because through all of this chasing external success, none of it was about me.
Mm.
So that was the piece that was missing from the story. So the bigger I went, the higher my ceiling was raised with more money, more opportunity, more stuff, more everything. My floor stayed low because I learned to self medicate and avoid my emotions. I learned to cope by playing the role and wearing the mask of who I should be, not my true self. So, over that decade, after getting out of the military and doing the whole corporate job and living this lifestyle, the evidence of that self medicating started to show. So, I was numbing out with food and alcohol, work, social media, television, drugs, all the things. And I weighed more than twice what I weigh now at
Mm.
my peak, at my rock bottom. I was on nearly 300 pounds.
Wow.
And I was walking with a cane because my health was so bad. I had braces on my hands just to function and write. And I was on all of these different medications, counteracting the side effect of the other medications, right? I was in that spiral and I mean, daily drinking. And it was in this moment at the end of 2014 where I'd already lost my corporate career because of my health. Obviously, my health is falling apart. My marriage is in shambles. Everything about my sense of identity was attached to all of this external stuff, and it was imploding. Get in a fight with my husband, and I go into the kitchen and I just go to my normal self-soothing, which is grabbing the food out of the cabinet, shoving it in my face, and chasing it with a bottle of booze again. So I don't have to feel what's coming up. And I stopped for just a moment as I'm bawling my eyes out. I'm just like, what the hell am I doing?
Mm.
And for the first time in a long time, I got the answer. And this voice says to me, oh, honey, you are just trying to make yourself look as ugly on the outside as you feel on the inside because you hate yourself.
Wow.
And that was a whole lot of reality I was not prepared to accept.
Yeah, that's
And,
heavy.
and the follow up was, and you made this. I mean, to actually take responsibility for the choices that I've made and the life that I created was actually something I'd avoided for a long time, because what nobody talks about is that control issues is actually avoiding responsibility,
Hmm.
because it's trying to control everything you can't control, while what you can control is out of control. And so that was my bitch slap from spirit. And I was like, all right, that's it. I am done. There is zero for me to be here for. And so I started planning my end. This was the last time I was suicidal. And thankfully, as I hilariously say, I was so type A that I passed out before my plan was perfect.
Hmm.
And I woke up the next day and remembered everything. And that was it, like a light switch. I was like, that's it, I'm done. I am done trying to control anything other than myself.
What did it look like when you woke up? How did your day look different? Did you go and find support? What did you do to begin that healing process?
It was very much an internal journey. I didn't feel like I really had a lot of support. Now, granted, I was seeing my therapist consistently at the vet center, my trauma therapist, you know. So, I mean, I kind of had a little bit to help at least be bumpers on the bowling lane. However, this was very much a journey of beginning the first step to building the one relationship I never had, and it was the one with myself.
Mm.
And that's what it was. It was the one relationship I didn't even know existed, let alone something to nurture. And so I went to my therapist too. I'm like, I'm done. I am throwing in the towel. I am done trying to control anything other than myself. And I just let it be this simple, simple thing. Because sure, I could go all in like I'd always done before and say, well, I need to change my career, my marriage, my health, my body, my mindset, everything all at once, and then set myself up for failure. But this was the one time I went into it with different clarity and different intention. And it was no longer attached to anything external as a form of measurement. I did not go into weight loss for a number. I went in because I wanted to feel healthy and get off medication. I wanted to learn how to be me.
Mm.
And the beauty of going into that in this different mindset was I allowed it to be easy. When I let go of trying to control something external, even the size and shape of my body went to where it wanted to go, which is where it wanted to go when it felt safe. And that was way less than what I would have gone had I been trying to control the outcome.
That's so fascinating. self-love and self-acceptance is such an interesting journey for so many people, right? And I have my own journey, and when people ask me all the time, one of the questions I used to ask on every single episode for the first 2 years of this podcast was like, how do you find self-love? Because I was trying to figure it out, and I was like, please, somebody give me the answer. But I feel like it's such a personal journey. There are some tools and things people can do to really begin to move forward, but it's such a personal thing. But what would your response be to, like, how do you find self-love? Because that was the beginning of the journey. Like, you didn't wake
Yeah.
up the next day and all of a sudden everything was fixed. Like, it takes
No.
time. Like, what did that look like?
It's
What did that look like?
yeah, it's still a journey, man. I mean, wow, it's layer after layer. I mean, it's this beautiful, beautiful book that we're constantly writing, and every different phase is just a new chapter. And it's so fun. For me, it was the biggest thing that I avoided in all that I did was the stillness of just being with me. And I feel like that being able to sit through the discomfort of just being with yourself, that's it. That starts giving you all the answers and all the clarity, and everything starts coming up. Like, that in itself is the action to activate the healing. I was having a conversation with a friend this morning. We were like, we need to move away from the healing journey and focus on the journey and allow the healing to be the byproduct.
Mm, yeah. That's beautiful. That's really, really beautiful, right? Like, it's just acceptance. It's
Yeah.
acceptance of everything that's happening. And so somebody like you who, you look at your life, right? A female in the front lines, valedictorian, amazing job right out of graduation, like all these things. How how do you now cope with failure or lack of reaching that goal with somebody who was so obsessed with it before?
Yeah. It's funny. I mean, nothing's a failure. Everything truly is. I mean, it's such a cliche, but as long as it's an opportunity to learn and flipping the script to a place of radical accountability, right? Radical ownership of every single situation is okay, what's my role in that? Because that's the only thing I can control. And if I didn't like the outcome, how can I approach it differently? So it's constant learning and adjustment. And it feels really freaking hard at the beginning. Really hard because, again, going back to sitting in the stillness and really observing self, we're always too busy. We're always focusing on everybody else. We're always doing all the things. Everything is a distraction from being with ourselves. And the more I've learned to be in that place of 30,000-foot view, right? Not in it, because you can't work on your shit when you're in your shit, but to be at the 30,000-foot view and just observe without judgment. That was the skill I needed to learn in order to build that relationship, in order for that side effect of healing to happen.
Yeah, that's incredible. And so how did you begin your entrepreneurial journey of teaching others? And then obviously we could talk about, obviously the business side of it too, but like
Yeah.
what made you make that leap? Because for me, if I had all these issues when I was successful in business, or successful as an employee, I'd be so worried about taking on the stress of entrepreneurship. Like, what made you make that leap?
Well, recognizing, and part of that building a relationship with myself was owning the truth that every job I've ever had, I was miserable. The only one that I did enjoy for a while was actually my time when I was in the military. And it wasn't when we were in garrison, it was when I was deployed. When
Mm,
I was deployed and I got to do my job, and not the job that I was in the military for, my job as a leader, my job empowering and guiding others to their greatness in the different ways I was able to do that during deployment. That was the spark. And I'll tell you, I've always been an entrepreneur. My very first hustle was at 10 years old, hosting kids' birthday parties. So all the 6 and 7 year olds, I'm hosting birthday parties. So innately, I am entrepreneurial by birth. I just rejected that because it was not an example laid for me in my life. There was a box I was put in, and that's all I could be in until I
mm.
learned to take the box off. So it was leaning into my healing journey, the business became a byproduct. Because guess what? When you lose 150 pounds, people notice. When you start smiling and glowing in a different way, like people look at my before photos and they don't even recognize that it's me because the identity of the person behind it is so radically different. And so they started to notice and they're like, what are you doing? Teach me how to do it.
Hmm.
So that inspired me to start my first business. And it was really in that lane of the coaching and helping people optimize themselves. And so for the last decade, it's been some iteration of helping optimize performance and profit for people who are driven by passion, purpose, mission, and message.
Yeah, when you gave your talk in DC, when you put up your before photos, I think I like audibly gasped. Like you look like an entirely different person. Like, and it's not just the weight loss, right? Like,
No, exactly.
it's how you carry yourself, it's the glow, it's how you present yourself, it's all these things, it's so much more. You can see that it's not just the weight loss, it's the confidence, it's the acceptance, it's all these things. So I want to go back a little bit in your life. We talk about how people all the time, when I have that self-love conversation on a podcast or whatever, they're like, well, why didn't you just love yourself? And I go, well, I was never taught that. Like, my parents didn't
Yeah.
love themselves. I never saw it. Talk a little bit about your childhood and kind of what that looked like and why that translated into that adulthood and these decisions you're making.
Yeah, I love that you recognize that, right? It is when you're a child and you're developing what they call esteem, right? And that's really 7 and under. Everything is modeled by your immediate family. And so that is where those generational patterns and traumas come from. Because if your parents don't have self-love, their capacity to love you is inhibited. And that in itself will leave a wound or a way in which we adapt and cope with that inability to have a deeper connection or more emotional availability or fulfillment or boundaries or whatever it is. And it's never about blaming parents. They're just working with the toolkit they have. And that was part of that empowerment for me to say, it's not the story, it's not what happened. It's how I learned to cope with what was happening around me, my response to what was happening around me, and how that helped me survive and served me until it didn't.
Mm, yeah, I love that.
Right?
Sorry, go ahead.
No, and just my parents didn't have that. They didn't have a lot of self-love, and they were both very emotionally unavailable because they were coping with their own traumas and their own challenges and their own generational stuff. So, it's
Yeah.
just what was modeled.
And how healing is it now as an adult? You can go back and realize that, hey, it's your parents' first time giving this a world too, right? Like, we can't always hold that pain or that anger towards them. When you just look and go, this is the first time they're doing this as well, right? And so
Mhm.
it's such an interesting thing, and I think that there's a healing process for that. Like, talking to people listening right now, like, if you're still holding a grudge towards your parents, let it go and focus on yourself at
Yeah.
this point, right?
Yeah.
It's such a crazy journey. Now we talk about I think you had called it high producers and then high performers, right? Um, as a high producer, your goal is hit the bullseye, do whatever it takes, be totally head down in whatever you're distracting yourself with, like whether that's building a business, whether that's being a student, whatever. And then the high performer, life looks way different. Like people love when I'm like, I work 2 to 3 hours a day, and people are like, what are you talking about? I'm like, I just want to enjoy my life, and that's not
Mhm.
working all the time. What does the difference look like for you from when you were a high producer to what you are now as a high performer?
Well, it's having learned, as I always say this, is to live a leveraged life. And it's about shifting the fulcrum of amplifying the minimal effort that goes in for maximum output. Because I'm no longer functioning from finite resources. High producers live and function from finite resources like time, physical energy, right? Like I've got the most amount of focus in the morning. And even though it's at 11 o'clock at night and I'm totally tired, I have to get it done, right? And it's very extrinsic. right? It's always chasing the dragon. But yet, why, even when I was in that space, every box that I checked, every success that I had, it was immediately on to the next thing, not celebrating or savoring because I didn't know how to receive, because none of it was about me. It was not an intrinsic experience, nothing internal. And now, true high performers, right? And I'm talking like if you look at Sir Richard Branson, he only works like an hour a day, a couple days a week, right? Like of
Yeah.
actual work because he's built a life of leverage. Same thing with Oprah, like 1 to 2 hours of work a day. And people would say, well, that's because of, and I'm like, no, no, flip it. They started living and leading that way, and that's what created massive amount of success because they learned to create leverage. And leverage is simply a one to many lifestyle where every 1 unit of effort you put into something creates numerous outcomes,
Mm, yeah.
right?
I
You're
love that.
functioning from managing your energy, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, financial, social, professional, environmental, right? They're all energy banks. And when you learn to maximize the energy and function from that space and eliminate the energy leaks at the beginning, right? Then it eliminates the profit leaks on the back end. Because every energy leak on the front end is a profit leak on the back end. That could be a profit leak, like bringing some sass and some crap to your marriage. That's an energy drain, right? You're bringing your word vomiting on your partner. Well, that profit is the love, connection, and intimacy on the back end, right? What's the health of that relationship? Could be financial in your business, right? Every time you're wasting time not holding to your boundaries on the front end, every leak in your schedule turns into a profit leak that shows up in your bank account.
Mm, yeah. It's so powerful too. And it's really, it sounds so simple, yet we all know it's not easy, right? Like,
Oh, yeah. It
it,
is very
it's,
simple,
yeah,
but it's not
it's a
easy.
process, right? So what would
It
you
is.
say to somebody listening right now who gets it? They hear you. They go, "I am
Mhm.
exhausted. I am destroying things even though I believe I'm building things." What would you say to them? What's the first thing they should do to begin to shift out of that?
The very first thing, and I always go really real and into a high level of discernment is first of all, the biggest mask you're wearing is the one with yourself. No one will lie to you more than you will. So the first step truly is getting super honest about what's actually happening. Because 80% of the work to get to where you want to be is just in awareness and ownership. And that's the uncomfortable part, right? There's the foundation of you can't even craft a plan if you don't know what's actually happening,
Mm,
because that's part of that running and avoiding self. So that's the hard part is slowing down and sitting down and getting really radically honest with you. What
yeah.
do you want? It's amazing how many people come into my ecosystem and they're like, hey, I've got this message, I've got this mission, like I've have an amazing business, but I'm ready to build my personal brand and really monetize in a big way. And I'm like, okay, that's awesome. And then they start spitting all these ideas about offers to me. And I was like, slow your roll. We need to start with the vision of the life you want to have 2, 5, 10 years from now. That's vital because that is going to determine how we build your offers. Because if you want a life that's super leveraged, if you build offers that require a ton of your time and energy, you're literally misaligning your present from your future, which means success is hard, failure is inevitable, burnout, hustle, all of it, right? And so it's recognizing even in the ideation and the development of things, there's ways in which you're already going to trip yourself up. And why it's so important to have an external mirror reflecting back to you the reality, right? It's why all of us who are successful have coaches, have mentors, have our professionals that we invest in for that guidance and support, because being that transparent with yourself is hard.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's crazy because obviously in my position with the people I get to interview, opportunity happens all the time. People are like, "Hey, I really like what you're doing. Thinking about doing this thing. Do you want to partner?" And I asked myself three questions, but two of the questions kind of aligns with that perfectly. And the first part is it fun? Like, will I enjoy the day to day, right? And if it's a no, I'm not in. And the second piece is how much time is this going to take, and is it worth the amount of time that it would take? Because again, like I think the quotes that hit me the hardest are always about how time is the only thing you can't get back. That whole Eddie Murphy from movies got 70 summers, 70 winters, and I'm just like, okay, well, if that's true, I mean, I hope to have more than that, but like, if that is true, like, I better maximize my time. And the end result isn't always like I need $10 million in the bank, right? Like there's so much more to it. So I love that you have that conversation with people because like, what do you want your life to look like, right? Like in our mastermind, we go, hey, what are your financial goals? Oh, $1 million. Well, why $1 million? Well, because of this, and this. I go, well, let's design your life. What do you want your life to look like? And
Mhm.
all of a sudden, it's only $400,000 you need to make, right? And so it's
Yeah.
like, oh wow, now I can look at things differently. I can work less. I can design this life in different ways. And I think there's so much beauty to that. So I love that you start there. But I want to ask you a question that I ask every single person on this show. It is a two-part question. The first part is, what is your definition of success? And the second part is, what are three things you do every single day to ensure that success for yourself?
Ooh. Ooh, okay. I love it. Um, how do I define success? It's been an interesting journey to the current definition. And I think for everyone to know your definition of success will always change because as you grow and evolve, so does your capacity to understand what's possible. And it only matches the work you've done so far. So, I mean, my idea of success 10 years ago would not have included any of the things that I've already done, like books and my upcoming TEDx talk and just all of these different things that I'm like, there's no way my capacity could have understood that. So for me, it is when things are easy and fun. So it's just allowing my day to day to feel effortless the more present I am. And that's how I gauge success. Have I been present today? Have I been able to experience joy and fulfillment regardless of external conditions? That is my idea of being influential, right? It's just who you're being is enough.
Hmm.
And that in itself elevates and inspires others to their greatness just by you being you. And so the days that I am most truly, radically, authentically me are the most successful days because that inevitably leads to all the other opportunities and abundance.
Yeah, and I love the idea of, if you have the ability to be present, that means you're in flow, right?
Yeah.
That means you're exactly where you're supposed to be.
Mhm.
And it reminds me of how I think about spirituality because obviously spirituality, faith, and all these things are such a big topic. And to me, I kind of came to this realization a couple years ago as I was diving deep into the spiritual journey of like, well, what is spirituality to me? And there's two components to it. The first one is there's something greater than you. I don't care what you call it, but you didn't create the universe. Something did, right? So like the acceptance of that, and there's a little sense of letting go at that point, right? The second piece is everything around us is energy, right? And so my goal in order to be in flow is to make sure that energy is flowing with me. And I know when that energy is flowing with me, I can be present in every moment. I can just be there, right? Am I perfect? Heck no. Like my
Mm-mm.
wife will tell you for the 2 weeks leading up to my event, I don't remember anything she said to me because my brain was somewhere else, right? Doesn't mean I don't love her. It was just somewhere else. So we're not always perfect,
Yeah.
but it's a work in progress for sure. So get to the second part of that question, what are three things you do every single day to ensure that success?
I like how thriving in consistency. I think that for a lot of entrepreneurs coming from trauma, we need boundaries and structure and discipline. However, we may have a challenged relationship with authority and structure and discipline because we either didn't have it or it was too much, whatever the case may be. So it's about thriving in consistency and having just the right amount of consistency to rely on becomes like the bumpers on the bowling lane. That means there's a lot more ease and freedom to play and go big because of it. So it's creating a bit of that balance. So I like the consistency of some routine, and honestly, I am a variety type, so I change up my routine fairly often, but there's always like an anchor and it'll kind of build and ebb and flow. So, it's not uber rigid. I just go through phases and periods in my life. And my coned cat just decided to wake up
I was
from
like,
his
what
nap.
is that?
What is that? Yeah, my double coned cat who's having an allergic reaction and chewing on himself. And since, they can contort that.
Yeah, that's
Like,
crazy.
yeah, we've got the daisy collars and all the stuff. Um, so we've got that, the thriving and consistency. So where can I have some consistency and routine as an anchor point to create success? Another piece is minding where things feel hard, because usually it's because I'm making it hard. When
Mm.
people are like, what's your quote? I'm like, look, it's only as hard as you make it. Seriously. And the default to hustle and control is, right, there's a story that says, we must suffer, struggle, or sacrifice to create success. And that's not my story. And I don't want to feed into that story. So I pay attention to where things feel hard. And over time, you learn to catch it sooner and sooner and sooner, right? So to kind of go back to your statement about, is this fun? If something starts to feel like work, feel hard, something's out of alignment. And so I just check in. And then the last and most important piece, because again, a lot of us recovering control freaks are hyper, hyper, hyper self-critical. That's why I wrote a whole book about the inner bitch voice, right? Because there's a lot of lies that we tell ourselves. We talked about that mask. You will lie to yourself more than anything. And so it's always checking in with what's happening in my head. And the question is this true?
Mm, I
Right?
love that.
So it's just finding a way to have checks and balances for yourself based on what you need. I need safety, a sense of safety. I get that in consistency. I know that I have a capacity to be in alignment and allow things to be easy. So I check in when something feels hard. And I know I have a really nasty internal dialogue that will lie and go off the rails the first second it can. So having checks and balances there and all of that coming together allow me to experience being deeply present, having fun and joy and freedom, being in a state of being free, very different, and experiencing fulfillment.
I love it. So I want to take you to the end of your life, Stacy, and I want you to imagine that all the content you've ever created has been wiped off the face of the planet. All the individuals that you helped, with their influence and continue to make more money and stop the leaks, that's all done.
Yeah.
And you can only be remembered for one sentence. What would you want that sentence to be?
Wow. It's still the same. It is only as hard as you make it.
I love it. I love it. So I wrap up every single interview with the same question, but before we get there, how do people find you? How do they get a hold of you? How do they work with you to stop these leaks that they have in their life?
Yes, absolutely. So, beautiful thing with being born with a branded name is if you search Stacy Raske online or go to stacyraske.com, it is me. So it is me responding to you. It's all my content, my profiles. So very easy to find. Same with the books and all the things. So, stacyraske.com is a nice central hub to all the cool things we're doing, the books, the events, the talks, the freebies, the resources, and really getting in touch with me to see if working together makes sense because, we can really just help you monetize your message and mission quickly through your personal brand, but build that leveraged lifestyle. So you're really having the greatest experience with optimal performance and profit.
I love it. So, like I said, I wrap up every single interview with the same question. That is, in your life, what has been your biggest moment of growth?
Mm. Today, every day in the present, it stacks and builds on everything I'm willing to own and observe and love and learn from the day before. So kind of like Office Space, but the opposite. It's it's the biggest growth opportunity is today. Because, it's easy to go back and say it was the rock bottom moment. I'm like, no, no, that was the wake up call. Everything that happened after that amplified, accelerated. And so today is that day. Tomorrow will be that day too.
I love it. Stacy, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your journey with my audience. Absolutely inspiring. Thank you for doing what you do every single day. This has been amazing.
Thank you. It has been an absolute, absolute honor, and you're very welcome.